Good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to talk about art. And when I lived in Kyoto and was studying Buddhism, I actually learned wood carving of Buddhist statues. And here's a head that I practiced making. And I saw a samurai movie once, and Miyamoto Musashi was carving something out of a big tree stump, a big a leopard or something, ferocious looking animal. And he had a big chisel like this and a hammer and was like, bang, 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 bang. So I fancied myself to be a wood carver like that, making great works of art. But I learned very quickly that the work is very minute and detailed. And so you see all the little curls of the Buddha's head. And so my knife was this little thing, which is the size of a pencil. And I had to carve each of these little curls like this. And it was very time consuming. Anyway, it was very tedious, and it wasn't the great craft and art that I imagined. But I did produce this statue here. Looks pretty good, right? Amida, Buddha. But this isn't really all my work because I learned from a teacher who I met with once a week. I taught him English and he taught me wood carving. And sometimes the nose would be like this. And so he would come and fix the nose. And anyway, he fixed all of my mistakes. And so we're able to produce something that looks pretty good. So this really was part of my great interest in art. And so today I would like to talk a little bit about Pure Land Buddhism and art. So let me share some slides with you. Okay, so first, I would like to show you this poster for a documentary that is now playing in various places called Carving the Divine. And you can see from this poster, it says that on top, the Buddhist Temple of Alameda is presenting this film. They're having a special showing this month. And so it's not playing in the theaters regularly, but you can catch it at film festivals. And I understand it's going to be on PBS next year. But the filmmaker is very interested in showing this in different venues. And so they might contact your temple. I hear the Palo Alto Temple up here in the Bay Area will be showing it. But it's a really great documentary talking about these great masters, and particularly some disciples that are learning wood carving. And they're talking about what a difficult life that they have because they have to devote themselves to this craft and art. But the master says, if you do live this kind of life in which there will be more pain than joy, then you will create a great work of art. And here's an example of a great work of art, which is the Miroku Bosatsu statue, or Maitreya statue, that's at Koryuji Temple in Kyoto. And this is a national treasure of Japan. But you can see the elegance and nobility and beauty that is really expressed in the statue, which expresses the great wisdom of the Buddha. So this is considered a great work of art. But I would like to talk about art that is considered not so great, normally considered very commonplace and more like folk art. But there was an art critic by the name of Sōetsu Yanagi, who wrote about Japanese, well, different forms of folk art in Asia, and how actually these simple forms of art really do express the true meaning of beauty. And he wrote an essay which first appeared in the Eastern Buddhist Journal in 1976 in English, and later was republished in this book called Interactions with Japanese Buddhism, edited by Michael Pai. But Yanagi was born in 1889 and passed away in 1961. And he found that you can equate the Pure Land with beauty, which he called the Pure Land of Beauty, which he says is here and now. And it's not an abstract concept, but a concrete reality right before my eyes, he said. During the last years of his life, he suffered from an illness and was bedridden. So he spent many long, sleepless nights, he said, examining pots and pictures, pondering over the strange miracle of the quiet beauty of each object. Yanagi talked about how, for example, in Christianity, it starts from the premise of creator and created, and judge and judged, which in Buddhist terms are dualistic ways of thinking about a life, which always results in opposition. We have a judge and we have those who are judged. We have a creator and those who are created, and they are always opposite of each other. By contrast, in Buddhism, truth precedes this kind of division, which means non-dualism, and which is sometimes called original mind. Therefore, in Pure Land Buddhism, there is no rich or poor, smart or stupid, high or low, chosen or unchosen. Now, if we were to relate this to art, we have talent versus mediocrity, skilled versus unskilled, genius versus common, and expensive versus cheap. That's the everyday world and mind that discriminates. However, Yanagi says, the Pure Land of Beauty never discriminates. Discrimination has no meaning. For example, he gives this example of, it's called a Qizhou bowl from the Song dynasty in China, which is approximately 800 years ago to 1,000 years ago. These bowls were made by potters who customarily employed 10-year-old children to paint them. These people were illiterate, uneducated, and without high instruction in art. Yet today, these images and crafts are highly prized. But yet these works were produced without thought to talent, genius, and skill. Likewise, Yanagi says, when we look at nature which surrounds us, for example, grass and stones, not to speak of flowers or butterflies, we discover that there is not a thing which is ugly. All things are beautiful in their true state. Although some of us might consider certain things less beautiful than others, such judgment is based on self-centered human ideas. In nature itself, ugliness is inconceivable. It is human convenience that discriminates, but in nature, that difference between the high and low, beauty and ugliness has no meaning. He cites the larger sutra on the Buddha of infinite life, which Shinran felt was the most important teaching. This sutra explains the non-existence of duality of beauty and ugliness. In the absence of duality, beauty emerges. Ultimate beauty becomes impossible apart from non-duality. The dichotomy of beauty and ugly disappears. However, Yanagi is careful to explain that such beauty doesn't mean rejecting ugliness, which implies duality. Rather, there is no dichotomy between beauty and ugliness. He said, "When I speak of a pure land of beauty, it is understood to be a place where all things, without exception, are accepted within beauty." Now here's a tea bowl, which you can see it's actually kind of misshapen, right? It's a little low on one end and a little high on the other and not quite round. But in its imperfection, there is beauty, according to Yanagi. Japanese tea ceremony masters recognized this sense of ultimate beauty in everyday objects by treasuring simple utensils for their quiet, humble splendor. Originally, such works were made as cheap, ordinary articles for day-to-day use. When they were produced, no thought was given to distinctions between noble and ignoble, rich and poor, aristocrat and commoner. They are examples of, quote, common folk utensils being accorded a high place in heaven. Differences in rank don't apply. Tea masters gathered these apparently inferior ordinary articles and praised them as masterpieces. They could see a quiet, settled beauty produced from a free, non-abiding mind attached to the thought of beauty and free from fixed views. Yanagi says that which made the tea masters unique was their perceptive desire to live with such things as their companions. In earlier times, ordinary articles were made in large quantity and naturally allied with beauty, which meant even the poorest people lived among superb artifacts, which were inexpensive and excellent. Beauty and low cost were not opposed. Yanagi talked about works. By contrast, he talked about works that were specifically made for the aristocracy and made to be valuable, precious items. For example, these Nabeshima bowls. Nabeshima porcelain is known for their colorful red enamel, but Yanagi says they seem constrained and lacking in vitality and freedom. Pretentious works exude ego, he says, which strives to judge, discriminate, divide, and set apart. He said luxurious, pretentious things contain much that is false because of the very effort to express beauty. All too often, the intellect is overworked. He said the intellect is the seed of ignorance. So this reminds me of the mind of discrimination, which is so highly prized in today's world. For example, on the Food Network, people are always judging so strictly and minutely differences in taste and food. And this kind of judgment is also used when we look at clothing, when we look at items such as watches and cars, and it's part of our everyday life. And people prize this kind of knowledge, and they're very proud of it, of being able to be so discriminatory. But Yanagi's words about how the intellect is the seed of ignorance made me think of the words of Shinran when he talked about his teacher Honen. Shinran said, "I remember Master Honen would smile as he recalled humble people of no intellectual pretensions visiting him. He'd say, 'Without doubt, their birth in the Pure Land is settled.' And after a visit by a man brilliant in letters and debating, Shinran said, 'I really wonder about his birth in the Pure Land.'" Yanagi said that the ego judges, discriminates, divides, and sets apart. He admits that a discriminating mind serves a practical function in daily life, but he warned, "Be aware that it takes us away from the Pure Land." He says that modern art is based on ism, such as dualism, meaning new versus old, which reflects an unending cycle of continuous conflict without resolution. To Yanagi, pretentious, inauthentic articles show traces of ego, vestiges of the intellect. By contrast, folk arts come from an innocent mind that leaps from heart to hand. He said luxurious, pretentious things contain much that is false because of the very effort to express beauty. All too often, the intellect is overworked. In folk crafts made by ordinary people with ordinary materials, there is no opportunity to assert ego. The beauty of those items comes from accepting them for what they are. It's a beauty of acceptance. He says it's similar to other power. Now here is something called Swan Kalak pottery from Thailand. Art is traditionally judged by the materials used to make it. For example, the highest grade clay is considered essential in making the best pottery. But Yanagi says in the Pure Land of Beauty, that requirement is unnecessary. He points to this Swangskalak pottery, which uses clay consisting of sediment from a local river. He said such clays in their very poorness of quality are given life by the way in which they are employed in fine pots. Used in a suitable way, one sees that the so-called bad clays come to life. We may learn from this that the birth of beauty of this sort is paradoxically dependent on what has been called poor clay. In the Pure Land of Beauty, there's no such thing as bad or ugly material. He says, we are all inclined to conclude that in order to create something beautiful, some kind of special gift is necessary. But that is not so. For left in our pure state, all of us are in a possession of the ability to create something beautiful. He likens this state to a bitter persimmon that ripens with sweetness. This thought reminds me of what Shinran said in the Tani Sho text, where he questions the meaning of good and bad. Shinran said, even a good person attains faith in the Pure Land, or even a good person attains birth in the Pure Land. So it goes without saying that an evil person will. Yanagi felt a pureness and innocence of spirit radiating from people unconcerned with rank and ego, struggling to live day to day. Such thinking is indicative of what he called the original mind of non-duality. He said, it's not because primitive craftsmen were outstanding geniuses or because they lived a truer life, but It's because they lived a truer life that's closer to their original nature than so-called civilized people. It's the same for paintings by children. When children become educated or sophisticated, they lose their capacity to draw freely and beautifully. So he cites Korean folk painting, which are done very simply. And this particular painting could be seen as having been done by a child. I don't know who did it, but it's an example that's in the book. And its beauty is in its simplicity. Yanagi says that usually primitive people are looked down upon as underdeveloped, but what they create are free and lively because their lives have not been affected by artificiality compared to the so-called cultured person. For this reason, they are able to give effortless freedom to their work. Thanks to the very fact they are not equipped with knowledge and discrimination, they have no attachments and are therefore free. Thus, they can express freedom both in their hearts and in their work. Yanagi was not arguing for discarding the ways of modern society, but he said once we understand how intellectual culture restricts our freedom, we should then be able to perceive with wisdom our shortcomings. He said primitive beauty might be called original beauty. This is like saying Buddha nature, that all beings have the capacity to become Buddhas. He said, if we replace the term Buddha nature with beauty nature, we see that all things from the beginning are endowed with beauty. Affirmation of this truth is taking place endlessly in the Pure Land of beauty. You all know that our Pure Land teachings, Jodo Shinshu, speak of other power. For Yanagi, proof of other power can be found in art. For example, in the glaze effects of Yozen, which changes in colors caused by intermittent clear burning and smoke in the kiln, and Haikazuki pottery, which changes in color caused by wood ash falling on melting glazes. These finishes are the result of fire and fallen ash, of which potters have no control. For Yanagi, this process is none other than other power. Here is a statue carved by Mokujiki. Mokujiki was a wandering itinerant monk, and he was known for his chiseled and rough, almost careless carving. Yanagi says to smooth over these defects would take away their beauty. In other words, their beauty lay in their defects. Once again, I recall Shinran's words when he said, obstructions of karmic evil turn into virtues. It is like the relation of ice and water. The more the ice, the more the water. The more the obstructions, the more the virtues. Yanagi wrote, it goes without saying that both gifted men and articles of high quality and refinement should be securely related to beauty. But what seems to me most interesting is the phenomenon before my eyes of ungifted people and their poor quality material showing an even stronger connection to beauty. This is like learned and saintly monks who have pursued a deeply spiritual life, who are comparable to simple, humble people who live by a profound truth. In Jodo Shinshu, these humble followers are called Myokonin. Here's a statue carved by the monk Enku. In Yanagi's Pure Land of Beauty, the three great oppositions disappear. Intelligence versus stupidity, skilled versus unskilled, and beauty versus ugliness. This doesn't mean that all become geniuses, intelligent, or skillful, nor does it mean that all objects acquire the same level of beauty. Yanagi wrote, "In this heaven, the common remains common, the stupid, the unskilled, the poor, each person remains as they are, and yet each and every one has their place in heaven." The Pure Land is a place where ugliness cannot occur. It's not that ugly is transmuted into beauty, but that even the ugly, when light falls on it, comes to life and is accepted in the Pure Land. Therefore, the duality of beauty and ugliness loses its meaning. Yanagi says this is similar to Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, which Shinran describes as a prayer of non-differentiation. To clarify, all does not become identical. Each and every distinction remains uniquely itself. They are embraced by the Pure Land of beauty. Again, it's not that ugliness alters itself into beauty in order to enter the Pure Land, but rather remaining as they are. The Pure Land of beauty accepts all. Once again, I am reminded of Shinran's words. He said, "I recall hearing the late Master Honen say, the people of the Pure Land tradition attain birth in the Buddha land by becoming their foolish selves." The Pure Land ultimately is none other than free beauty, Yanagi says. This means release from humanly contrived bondage and a return to the original nature, which is beauty nature. Since this means liberation from attachment to things, it also means a free mind. In the same way, the larger sutra says, bodhisattvas are like the great earth because they have no thoughts of discrimination, such as pure or impure, beautiful or ugly. Why do people long for the Pure Land? Yanagi thinks because they want to escape the ugliness surrounding them. But the Pure Land isn't a distant time and place. It's here and now. Proof is in simple crafts made by humble people. Yanagi says, "I glimpsed in them the beauty of heaven on earth. In them, the Pure Land is most brightly reflected." So I have now a new appreciation for this rough statue that I made, that I am looking at with new eyes. Thank you very much. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.